Coming up, Iowa City's reaction to the vice presidential debate. Then, how Iowa is helping in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene.
And later, the Middle East is on the verge of an all-out war.
All that and a profile on a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, important dates this week in history, along with making sure your facts are straight.
Also a recap of the vice presidential debate, the latest from polls, and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Johnny Valtman. And Jordan, could you believe it? We are just about a month out from the general election. And I mean, it feels like the time's flying. Just seems like yesterday we were covering the caucus, and now a month from now, we'll have the whole fun stuff with the election. And of course, last night really kicked off the final stretch of the election cycle.
Yeah, Johnny, I mean, every day, I turn on the TV and I just keep seeing those political ads. I just can't believe how close we are. And of course, as most people know, last night was a key moment in the 2024 race for the presidency. But in case you don't know, however, the vice presidential debate was held last night between Tim Walz for Kamala Harris and the Democrats and J.D. Vance for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Area party affiliates, including the Johnson County Democrats and the Young Americans for Freedom at Iowa, held watch parties for the debate. With a recap and reactions from both sides, we had reporters out with coverage, including two of the Update's very own.
On Tuesday, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance faced off in their first and only debate of the 2024 election. For many voters, this was both nominees' first chance to introduce themselves and their policies. Similar to the presidential debate in September, key issues such as abortion and immigration were central to the debates.
So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations.
We had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Let voters make these decisions. Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place.
Unlike the presidential debate, however, exchanges between the two nominees remained relatively cordial as both Walz and Vance aimed their attacks on each other's running mates. While vice presidential debates historically affect the outcome of an election very little, the exchange did offer voters a chance to learn more about their future leaders. Meanwhile, in Iowa City, some of these voters gathered to watch the debate unfold. I'll send it to DITV's Julia Rhodes, who was at a gathering for one side of the political spectrum.
I'm here at Field Day Brewing Company, where the Democratic Party from Johnson County has gathered to watch the debate.
The Democrats watched as Vance and Walz faced off, but as the conversation commenced, many of the viewers had opinions on each candidate's values and performances, especially J.D. Vance.
He just comes off as a fake, like a snake oil salesman, a false preacher, just trying to gaslight and stretch the truth to his advantage.
However, many viewers also thought the calm nature of the debate was commendable to both parties. Onlookers compared the respect and undisturbed nature of each candidate to past debates.
It's got to be very easy when you're on the stage with Donald Trump to get worked up.
It wasn't all criticism, as there was a lighthearted Tim Walz lookalike costume contest, where the winner left with a free Harris Walz yard sign. They also used the time to write postcards to voters in Jay Gorsh's district, reminding them to vote for him.
It's an important race here in Johnson County, one of the many races on our path to the majority as Democrats.
The Democrats are focusing on the importance of local upcoming elections and how these will affect the future of the state of Iowa as well as the nation.
Johnson County Democrats are using their voices in hopes of making a change. Now we'll send it to Kayla Smith, where members of the Republican Party are gathered together to watch the candidates go head-to-head.
Thanks, Julia. I'm here at the Iowa Memorial Union, where Young Americans for Freedom are hosting their watch party for the final scheduled debate of this election cycle. A group of around a dozen Young American for Freedom members came together to support Ohio Senator J.D. Vance in his vice presidential debate against Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
And the American people need to hear is who these people are, why they go into office, and what they stand for.
Some members of the organization viewed this as an opportunity for voters to understand who J.D. Vance is, independent from former President Donald Trump.
That's more of an American dream type story that the American people can gravitate around. I think that's easier for people to connect with than say, Trump's upbringing.
He's his own man. So Vance is his own man. He has his own ideas of what America should be. He's told them in the debate. He's not agreeing with Trump on everything, and that's, to be certain. Everyone's their own person.
Many members felt that this debate was more civilized than the presidential debate in September and praised the candidates' ability to talk about policies and appreciate the other side of the political aisle.
I like how they keep referring to each other's sides, mentioning both good and bad of either side. Shows that they're human, not just because they're on the opposite side that everything they do is bad.
It's not constant back and forth. You're actually, hearing and having a dialogue.
With only 34 days until Election Day, both voters and candidates are hoping that this debate will be the final push that either side needs to win the White House come November. From the Iowa Memorial Union, this is Kayla Smith, DITV.
With such a monumental event, it can be easy to forget what the local governments are doing here, but don't worry, I gotcha. Johnson County officials went to the UI Democrats meeting on Monday to urge them to vote yes on the ballot in November for a new $30 million bond for county conservation projects. And the Iowa City Council made a few steps on regulations on Tuesday that will affect local businesses. The council proposed a rule that would not allow new tobacco shops, to set up within 500 feet of another tobacco shop, a K-12 school, or university property. They also made the first move towards banning the sale of kratom by passing the first reading 4-1. The rule and proposal will be voted on over the next few meetings to determine if either will go into effect. And Johnny, just a whirlwind of stuff going on around the local level, but of course there's always a lot going on around the state.
Yes, Jordan, and these whirlwinds, it throws us all around the state, and that's why we're going to be sending it out to Kayla Smith, who has an update for us at the state level.
Thanks, guys. Iowa shut down the majority of their speed cameras on Tuesday. This is due to an Iowa law that was passed in May that required all speed cameras to submit data to the Iowa Department of Transportation by October. 128 applications to keep the cameras were denied, leaving only 11 speed cameras in the state of Iowa. Only 5 cities, Davenport, LeClaire, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Marshalltown, were allowed to keep some of their cameras. Governor Kim Reynolds is sending relief in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Reynolds announced on Monday that the Iowa Army National Guard will be deployed to North Carolina until October 8th. A state-operated swift water rescue team will also be sent to help search and rescue individuals who might need medical attention or assistance. Some Red Cross members from Iowa will also be working to provide necessities such as food, water, shelter, health services, and emotional support to those affected by the hurricane. The state of Iowa is challenging a pork ban in Massachusetts. The state of Massachusetts has a ban on selling and transporting pork into their state if producers do not comply with their hog housing regulations. This ban was upheld by a federal judge this year after backlash from other states. Among the regulations include the ban of pork sales coming from pigs kept in confined spaces. Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird is currently fighting the ruling in an attempt to protect farmers who she feels might face negative economic impacts due to the ban. There has been a lot happening over the state of Iowa this week, but for now, I'll send it back to Jordan and Johnny.
Thanks, Kayla. And Jordan, we were talking about, how this week it's felt like a whirlwind. Last week it felt like a Twisters. Just so much going on. Just it seems everywhere.
Yeah, Johnny, we're going to keep things spinning around here, and we're going to send it out to Hannah Lipski, who has this week's national update.
A big week in national news. A vice presidential debate, Hurricane Helene ravaging the southeast coast, and tensions heightening even more in the Middle East. And breaking news coming out of Washington, D.C., a judge unsealed new evidence in Trump's election interference case on January 6th. The evidence, spanning 165 pages, includes testimony from witnesses and notes taken by former Vice President Mike Pence. This is still developing and we'll keep you updated. And out of the Middle East, tensions are heightening as another player is getting involved in the Israel-Hamas war.
Iran launched 200 missiles into Israel yesterday in defense of Gaza and Lebanon, 2 of their allies in the Middle East. This comes after Israel began a ground invasion into Lebanon in retaliation against Hezbollah attacks on northern Israel.
Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it.
Israel claims it is trying to push Hezbollah away from the border, while Iran and Lebanon are claiming Israel is attempting to gain more territory. Over 1,000 people have died in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon since Israel's Patriot explosions began last week. The U.S. has been bracing for retaliatory Iranian attacks after Israeli attacks on Hamas and Hezbollah leaders.
And let us be clear, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is also a threat to American personnel in the region, American interests and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and backed terrorist proxies.
Iran had previously warned that any ground invasion into their allies' territory would provoke a military response. Iran claims its attacks have ended and will not carry out any more strikes unless further provoked.
And you know, Johnny, it's been a whirlwind of things, keeping that theme of spinning things around here. And you know, we're going to keep it big, Johnny. We're going to keep looking around the country here as you have a candidate you'd like us to look at this week.
Yes, Jordan, and it's a candidate that could have, national impacts, especially in Congress, because we're talking about someone who is running for the U.S. House of Representatives, and that is the Democrat nominee for Iowa's 2nd District congressional seat, Sarah Corkery. Corkery is a Cedar Falls resident who owns a business and is the mother of 3 kids. Her and her husband have created the Corkery and Corkery Marketing Services, where they offer services in branding strategy, destination marketing, creative services, and financial services marketing. Corkery is also a cancer survivor. Corkery is running wanting to put Iowans over politics. She's claimed that Ashley Hinson, her opponent, is not doing enough for Iowans. Her campaign has put an emphasis on 3 key issues for the state: care, kids, and communities. The campaign is using a rules to the road guide for her campaign based on integrity and compassion. This is Corkery's first time ever running for an elected office, as she faces Hinson, who is seeking a 3rd straight term. And Jordan, with that, we have now covered 2 of Iowa's congressional districts. We still have 2 more to go in about a month to get them. We'll get them all in, folks, don't worry. But I mean, they're doing a lot of campaigning, and they really have to step it up with the election being so close.
Yeah, Johnny, I mean, they're just going all around. And, you know, like I said, we're keeping it big. Well, guess what, Johnny? We're about to get even bigger. And we're going to send it back to Hannah, who has this week's campaign tracker.
Thanks, guys. Now, there are 34 days until Election Day, and the presidential nominees and their running mates are on the move. Swing states are key right now, and it's a tight race with the nominees practically tied in several of them. Former President Donald Trump visited Georgia amidst Hurricane Helene. He was in Valdosta on Monday to assess the damage, before heading on to Wisconsin on Tuesday. While in Georgia, Trump made the false claim that Biden was ignoring Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's phone calls. And today, Vice President Kamala Harris ended her West Coast campaigning early to visit Georgia. She toured the damages in Augusta, where she promised the repairs would be 100% covered by the federal government. She's moving on to other states ravaged by Helene. After the debate last night, the vice presidential nominees are on the campaign trail without their running mates. Today, Senator J.D. Vance stopped in Michigan, where he mocked Tim Walz and said he was really annoyed at him. And Governor Tim Walz was in Pennsylvania to finish up the tour without his running mate. His main topic was clarifying a misstatement he made during the debate, where he claimed to be in Hong Kong during the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Now that's all the campaign updates. I'll send it back to the boys for an update on the polls.
And Jordan, I mean, we've been talking a lot about these vice presidential candidates. I mean, last night they were debating each other in one location. Now they're going their own separate ways, kind of like that Journey song. And, you know, I do want to take a step back here and, you know, see what people were thinking about last night's debate.
Well, Johnny, keeping with our theme here tonight, you know, we're going to spin it over to me to look at some polls. And, you know, some of these candidates, they're going to look at these poll numbers and they're going to try to spin it into an advantage for themselves. But not me, folks. I'm not going to spin anything for you. I'm only giving you the cold, hard numbers. The hosts of last night's debate, CBS News, they were taking polls on who won, and they said that Governor Tim Walz from Minnesota won with a 42 to 41% margin over J.D. Vance, just edging him out for people saying who won the debate. CBS News took a look at a number of things that they polled people on, including a presidential preparation poll. Now that means, let's say Kamala Harris gets elected. What if she dies? Can Tim Walz run the country? Do you think he can run the country? So that's what they're looking at here. Harris's running mate Tim Walz polled in at 60% of watchers who said he would be prepared to take over the country in an emergency. J.D. Vance, Trump's VP pick, still scored a prepared rating with over with 55% of voters saying they would trust him to run the country in place of Donald Trump. Part of every debate are the two candidates giving theirs or their running mate's stance on voter issues. CBS asked these viewers who talked about a few of these topics better. Voters said that Walz did a better job talking about abortion compared to Vance, blowing him out 62 to 38. Vance wouldn't get his turn to blow out Walz, however, as the rest of the topics stayed close, including the topic of conflict in the Middle East, where viewers rated both men the same, splitting the two in a dead heat 50-50. Vance would grab a few wins of his own among viewers, including on immigration, where he scored 52-48 over Walz in that and 51-49% relating to the economy. Now, Johnny, this vice presidential debate was one for the history books, and you know, like I always say, God, I love history.
Yeah, Jordan, and you know, I will say, compared to some of the previous debates I've seen that I can remember, this is probably the best one I've seen where they just focused on, you know, topics and economy, and it was nice to see. But like you said, we're going to get into the history books, and this week, it was a mixed bag, but we'll hop into that, because on September 29th, 1789, the United States created the first United States Army. 1,000 men enlisted to the First Army to defend the nation after the Revolutionary War. Since then, the Army has branched out into the United States Armed Forces with 6 different branches with 1,328,000 active members and 799,500 in the reserves. Yesterday marked 7 years since the 1 October shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada. The shooting occurred after gunman Stephen Paddock opened fire on the attendees at the Route 91 Country Music Festival from his Mandalay Bay hotel room. Paddock fired over 1,000 rounds from more than a dozen guns. 60 attendees were killed in the shooting, not including the gunman, and an additional 867 were injured, making this the deadliest mass shooting in American history. Following the shooting, bump stock extensions to AR-15s were federally banned by the Trump administration, but this ban has since been overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. And to line it up, in this week in history, we had a special occasion as former president and peanut farmer Jimmy Carter turned 100. Born in Plains, Georgia in 1924, Carter graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, then returned home to help out his family's peanut farming business. Carter served in the Georgia Senate and eventually as governor, and then in 1976, Carter came out of the blue and won the Democratic nomination for president. He would barely beat out Gerald Ford to earn him the presidency. In office, Carter accomplished the Camp David Accords, the Panama Canal Treaty, and a second round of strategic arm limitation talks. Carter also faced American hostages being held in Iran for the entirety of his administration, an energy crisis, troubles with the Soviet Union, and the Carter Doctrine, which led to an escalation of the Cold War. He lost his re-election in a landslide to Ronald Reagan. But not deterred, post-White House Carter would create the Carter Center with its focus on expanding human rights. He was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his humanitarian efforts. He remains the oldest president to ever live at 100, and he is still going to this day. And for you sound pumpers out there, this week in history saw iconic alternate hits such as Radiohead's Kid A and R.E.M's Automatic for the People release. The Replacements released their musical breakout with Let It Be, and Matchbox 20 debuted their first album, Yourself or Someone Like You. And Jordan, you know for sure Jimmy Carter's kind of a cult icon here, as I like to use him whenever I'm doing mic checks, and it's always, hey, is Jimmy Carter still alive? You're right, he is. And so, happy birthday, Jimmy Carter. And some people, they may say he's a man on the moon.
Yeah, Johnny, when I heard it was Jimmy Carter's birthday, I certainly thought about you, a special day for you. And you've been giving us some cold hard history. I gave us the cold hard numbers, but I know a guy who's going to give us the cold hard facts. And Johnny, you mentioned R.E.M. earlier, and we got Jayce standing in the corner and standing in the spotlight for fact check.
Thanks, Jordan. And hey, Johnny, fingers crossed that we're going to get some good music for This Week in History next week. But for now, surprisingly, there's not much to fact check from the vice presidential debate, and so this must be what it felt like when people were normal. But we're not entirely out of the woods yet, as there's been some incorrect information swirling around about Hurricane Helene, the biggest one regarding the media's coverage of the storm. Many users online have taken to social media claiming that the mainstream media is 100% without a doubt ignoring the destruction from Helene. This is simply not true. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and most every other major news outlet has frequently been reporting on the storm. It's just that the users claiming they aren't are only going to social media rather than sitting down and watching the news. And second, some are claiming that the storm is unnatural and that it came from nowhere. One, the whole point of hurricanes is that they kind of show up with no real warning as to how destructive they're going to be. Second, the reason Helene is moving so unnaturally is because the storm has moved so far inland that it's pressing against the Appalachian Mountains, which is preventing Helene from moving westward. That's all I have for now, so I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce, for giving us the cold, hard facts this week, completing the triumvirate of cold and hard. And we're going to move on here to something a little more opinion-based, Johnny.
Yes, Jordan, I mean, every week it's always good to hear, the different opinions, what people are feeling. And this week it is Kayla Smith who will be giving us her first for your consideration.
Thanks, guys. And something for you to consider this week is civility in politics. Last night, Americans watched the vice presidential debate, and if we compare it to last month's presidential debate, it was miles different. We saw candidates speaking on their policies in a respectful manner. Sure, they disagreed on a lot, but they also took the time to find topics that they do agree on. The calm nature of the debate was shocking to some viewers because debates haven't felt like that in a while. So let's take the presidential debate in July between former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden, for example. Biden called Trump a whiner, while Trump tried to say that Biden was a weak Palestinian. Name-calling and belittling like this has zero place among the politicians who are meant to represent the American people. Last night, it was a reminder to the American public that debates are not supposed to be a form of entertainment. They shouldn't feel like a reality TV show with politicians slinging insults back and forth. Debates are meant to be informational and teach voters about the candidates that they're voting for based off of policies. I personally think that it's time for politicians and the public to think about the current state of the political sphere and use last night's debate as an example of what all politicians should strive for. So now I'll go ahead and toss it back to Johnny and Jordan.
Thank you, Kayla. And with that being said, Jordan, we are now 33 days away from the election. So we'd like to thank you for tuning in to the update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From the update, I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful night.